Angry face. Hi all. So we thought we'd do this tonight so people could ask questions on the live chat about our trip to DC. As soon as we got back, I had a little stint in the hospital with lupus and caught a bug while we were in DC. So that's why a lot of the footage hasn't been put up on the channel yet, and edited articles aren't out yet. We're going to start doing that today, tonight, and tomorrow. So we went to the inauguration ceremony. We had a ticket through Senator Crapo's office, the Idaho senator, and we were not able to utilize that ticket to get into the ceremony. So the live stream that was scheduled, I know some of you were set up to watch it. The live stream that was scheduled for the ceremony itself never went through because protesters had caused Secret Service to shut down the roads leading to the checkpoints for ticketed members for the ceremony itself. So there was that. So we ended up being moved to a secure part of the parade route through another checkpoint. They said basically, you ticket holders who aren't going to get in, we'll put you through this checkpoint over here to this part of the parade route that we've had closed off. So that was where we were able to cover from. We just set up the equipment and filmed the ceremony on the loudspeakers that they had up and talked to the police officers there and some of the people that were waiting to see the parade. And then we covered some of the goings on around the parade route. The parade did start about 4 hours later than it was scheduled to start, according to the itinerary that we got from Senator Crapo's office. So we ended up leaving before the parade because at that point we weren't going to have time to go and change and get to the inaugural ball if we stayed to cover the parade. So we kind of had to make a choice. So we did end up going and getting into the official ball for Trump's camp. The Freedom Ball is the one that we attended, and that was lovely. The line outside was pretty insane. It wrapped around 2 whole blocks easily. Mm-hmm. We did see Caitlyn Jenner right up close, face to face in the line. There were a lot of other people that were there waiting to get in. We spent about 2 hours at that ball, and the next day we went and covered the Women's March. So all that footage that we have is going to be being put up tonight and tomorrow for everybody to see. And we just had a little bit of a rough time getting it all edited and uploaded and getting the stories that go with it on there. So we wanted to do this little Q&A since we hadn't been able to get that stuff up and just answer anybody's questions they have about anything that went on in DC. If you want a first-hand account of anything, we will answer it to the best of our ability. I see right now we only have 1 viewer. I don't know if you have any questions you want to ask, but hopefully we'll get more people coming this way. And if not, we'll probably just shut it down in the next 10 minutes. But is there anything you want to add to what you thought of our little trip?
It definitely wasn't as bad as what you might have seen on the media outlets. I know some of the media outlets keep showing this footage of the rioters smashing buildings and setting stuff on fire, but that seriously took place on 1 little block, and it lasted a whole 10-15 minutes. So, we also covered the Women's March after the inaugural ball the following day. So we have footage of that.
Yeah, we didn't really see, I mean, there were protesters sitting next to people with Make America Great hats on all along the parade route, chatting with each other cordially, being very, I mean, there was not this rampant violence and rioting and kind of stuff that the news keeps replaying. It seems like those were very isolated incidences, and there were far more peaceful people and people who really didn't seem that. I mean, my impression I got of a lot of the protesters that we approached and that we filmed was that it wasn't this outrage. They weren't just, you know, screaming and being violent, and for the most part they seemed like they had just come to be able to say they showed up, and many of them were just kind of sitting around chatting with people. They didn't get hostile with Trump supporters. They didn't, I mean, they were just very normal. It really didn't, to see that in person, it did not seem that the divide that the mainstream you see on CNN and CNBC and it really didn't seem like this divide that they're trying to sell us is nearly as prevalent as what you would think watching mainstream news. So we kind of thought that was it was interesting to see the very vast contrast between what you see reported on mainstream news and what it's like really in person. It was just odd to see that. So I don't know, what else should we wait for some people, or oh, we did I mean, we do have some footage of one. We put one article up. We do have some footage of one woman that was kind of aggressive, trying to kind of incite perhaps a violent response from the people she was addressing. There was a group, a pro-life group, that had filed a long time ahead of time to get a permitted area to put up their, anti-abortion signs and their information, phone numbers for people to call for help and stuff. And they had a permitted area along the presidential parade route that was sectioned off because they did have that permit. And we did get video of one woman that was pretty aggressive, trying to incite a response from them. And I felt like the young people that were manning that booth handled themselves really well. They didn't respond violently to her or even aggressively, and they just talked facts. And I thought one of the funniest things was when she was arguing with them and really screaming in their face, and you don't have any right to say anything about my reproductive organs. I loved his response. And he said, I don't want anything to do with your reproductive organs. We're concerned about what it reproduces, the product, not the, and she went on to argue with him and said, it's not a baby. He said, these are babies. Look at them. These are babies. And she said, it's not a baby. What do you call it? And she couldn't think of the word. She had to turn to her friend and ask. And she said, oh, yeah, a fetus. It's a fetus. That's not a baby. And that I had to kind of compose myself and not, because we have the camera there. We're trying to cover it and be professional. And I had to kind of compose myself when she said that. See, it's not a baby. It's a fetus. And it just, I don't know. That just, it got to me. I had to really stop myself from laughing out loud when she said that, because that's the definition of a fetus. It's the offspring, So we thought that was funny. But for the most part, we just saw it was very calm, and we walked right along the street that they keep showing on loop, I think, on CNN, CNBC, all these, where they showed the protesters were destroying trash cans and meters.
Yeah, where they smashed in the Bank of America. We walked right by that Bank of America.
Right.
Like the same day, obviously before it happened, but.
Yeah, and it was just peaceful there. There wasn't a crowd of protesters. It was.
But then that night when we were walking to and from the ball, there was no people. It was just business as usual. Everybody in DC was just walking around normally. There was no destruction in the streets. We saw one protest group that was being non-violent, and they actually had a police escort.
Right. So it was, it was not what the media would have us believe. I feel like, and walking from the inaugural ball, when we left the inaugural ball at 11:30, and walking from that, you had heard all these groups had plans to disrupt the inauguration and the inaugural ball specifically. And walking from that, we walked 10, 20 blocks from there through DC, and we met normal people walking their dogs, and it was very calm. There was one protest that went by that we recorded that and got that on film, and they were very peaceful and calm, and there was probably maybe 50 people, and they had a police escort. There was police officers on motorcycle units just riding along with them, and that was the only protest activity that we saw proceed after or around the area where the inaugural balls were. So it just seems like to me, that the media really is trying to sell a very different picture than what the reality in DC was. And even the Women's March, we went and covered that and talked to several people, and there wasn't any violence. There wasn't any burning anything down. There wasn't, talking to people, we did a bunch of one-on-one interviews at the march, and the biggest thing that struck us is that they weren't, none of them really talked about women's issues. It really was more, it was just an anti-Trump protest.
Yeah.
They weren't really
Well,
addressing
a lot of
women's
them,
issues.
a lot of them even said they weren't worried about more rights. They weren't there fighting for more rights. They're fighting there for the potential loss of rights,
Right.
which is just it's kind of insane.
Right. They weren't, they hadn't said, we're here to fight against this thing that happened or that thing that, they all said they were there to fight for what might happen or what they might lose or what. And when you ask them questions about policy or how are you going to lose that or what, well, it's just, stuff he said along the campaign trail. Well, what stuff? Well, I don't, it just, many of them, I mean, we met two kinds to my mind. We met the kind that were just there to be able to say they were there and they showed up and they were a part of it and really didn't seem to care as much about any issues in particular. They just wanted to be a part of something. And then you had the ones that really was just anti-Trump, just
Right.
and when you talk to them about anti-Trump, they, their main thing was the tape that was released, him, the awful thing that he said, but in talking to his buddy that was never meant to be public, it was 12 years ago. That was really the only thing that anybody clearly quoted as to why.
Well, I think one person's had the most genuine concern that we've heard was someone's concern for the repeal of Obamacare.
Right.
And with that, if you're a person that's on Obamacare, it is probably really scary. But if you look at if they'd taken the time to actually look at what they want to do, no one's going to lose access to health care because of it. People just don't want to be paying, premiums that are 106% higher than what they were
Right.
previous. That's not fair to the working man.
Right.
But that was the closest thing we got to like any kind of legitimate concern from the protesters, and for the most part, it was just a bunch of incoherent. There was no cohesive message. It was just everybody had a different sign, everybody had a different message. And I know there's strength in numbers, but if it's just a big incoherent mass, no one's ever going to hear your message because you don't have one.
Well, and you see, the media keeps replaying, the 0.5%. They find them the minority, the ones that are violent, and they take those instances, those handful of instances that are the minority, and they play it on a loop. They play it on a loop, and they try to sell it that this is all the protesters. They're all rioters. That's what they try to sell it as, and that's just not what we observed. I mean, we even, as the women march, we set up our equipment and filmed a good 2 miles of the women's march. I mean, it was like a good 45 minutes of footage just filming the women's march as it went by, and it was extensive. I mean, there was probably a good million people in that march, but there were two young men that couldn't even vote yet. They were juniors in high school, and they were standing on the corner that the march was passing by, wearing their "Make America Great Again" hats. Now, mind you, these young men couldn't vote. They weren't, they just supported Trump, and they had come to D.C. to see the inauguration, to support Trump. They were there with a supervised chaperone, and they were standing right out on the corner that the whole march was going by. And we went over and asked them some questions and did an interview, and they said no one had been violent towards them. They said a couple people had come up to them and dropped the F-bomb but they weren't attacked. And they have a march going by them that's literally 1 million people, and no one attacked these young men. No one got violent. Nobody spit on them or got aggressive, and they're standing just right there, right up to the march with their "Make America Great Again" hats on. So I think when the media is trying to sell us the rioting and the violent protesters and trying to really make it seem like it's this violent opposition to Trump, it's kind of irresponsible. It's irresponsible journalism, because they're not showing that, yes, we're showing you this story, but this was a fraction of 1% of the amount of people that showed up. And that's not unrealistic to say it's a fraction of 1%. I mean, we were there, we saw the protesters on Inauguration Day, the protesters the following day, and any that did any violence or anything, it really was maybe a fraction of 1% of the people that showed up. And many of the protesters, I mean, they would talk to us, smile with us, they were giving me hugs. Many of them did not seem opposed to people, They would stand right next to Trump supporters in the parade route and have cordial conversation. They weren't. What I saw, I mean, what we saw on this trip, it gave me a lot of hope, because what I saw was that this country is not nearly as divided as what the media has sold us. We're not nearly as divided as what they want us to believe that we are, because all these protesters can stand right next to Trump supporters and have cordial, nice conversations, and the media will never ever show us that. They won't. They'll show us the 2 or 3 people destroying buildings and starting fires, and they won't show you the people just acting like normal people, smiling at each other as they pass in the streets and having a cordial conversation and just being human. They're not willing to show that, but it's a really good lesson to show. It may not be as sensational, it may not be attention grabbing, but it's people need to know that 99.9% of the people that were out Inauguration Day and the day after were not violent. We're not, they're out there marching, and it's not a women's march, it's an anti-Trump march. But if you were conservative, if you were wearing a Make America Great Again hat, they weren't attacking you. They'd still come up and chat and be cordial and ask directions and be just human. So, that's something that people really need to know. Our country's not so far away from becoming unified and healing as they would have us believe. And we need more people out there in journalism and willing to be out on the streets and show that side of it, and not be so concerned about sensationalizing everything and making it what's going to grab attention, what's going to be the most entertaining. People need to be willing to want to know the truth. We want our news sensationalized. We want the extreme stories. They're more entertaining. But that's creating a divide. So we have to start showing them, even if the truth might be boring, we have to start saying that we want to know the truth, whether you think it's boring or not. We don't want to be entertained. We want to be informed. So I see we have 2 viewers on now. Would either one of you guys like to ask any question at all about the inauguration ceremony, the inaugural ball, the Women's March, anything in DC, a story that you saw that maybe we can give you more information on? Any questions at all? You can use the live chat function. I think all our other videos are kind of going to speak for themselves. So if nobody has any questions, I think we'll probably end it here. We'll be doing our video on Sunday of the first taping of our actual show. So feel free to subscribe, and we'll be adding our footage and all of that. We'll be covering different topics every week, one show on Sunday, and we'll add more video and add more topics. And as always, we like suggestions of what you guys would like to see covered, what you're interested in, where you want us to be on the ground firsthand. You guys are why we want to do this. We want to be a voice for just regular everyday people. Imagine that. So since nobody seems to be submitting any questions, I guess we're going to call it. But hopefully we gave you guys some more information that you haven't seen elsewhere, just the reality of what it was like out there, that it wasn't a violent meltdown all over the place. And we'll be putting up all the footage tonight and tomorrow so you guys can see for yourselves the one protest we found on the way back from the inaugural ball, and the footage of the inauguration, the parade route, the Women's March. You can see all that. But the Women's March, how they're represented on mainstream, you'll see from our footage. It really was 2 types of people. They either just wanted to be there to be able to say they were there. Hey, I'm cool. I showed up. I'm here. Or they really, really hated Trump, but they couldn't tell you why, other than the one tape and the one comment. And so it was very hard to get we didn't get any interviews with anybody that could tell us anything about policy or why they hated him politically. What are his policies? How does that impact you? They didn't know anything about really any of that. And most of their information, it was really apparent that it came from peers. They weren't really informed outside of their own peer group. So we'll get that footage up and you guys can judge for yourselves. But feel free to subscribe. We'll do more videos like this from time to time, but mostly we're going to be doing our pre-taped shows on Sunday. And then, as always, we'll be putting up the footage and coverage of events that we go to live on the ground. So hopefully you guys are all having a good night. See you Sunday.
See you.